Hey there! I'm Sarah A. Chrisman, the author of The Tales of Chetzemoka, and today I'm going to talk to you about world building in historical fiction by telling you about the background of Chetzemoka and how the elements of a place contribute to a story. Every story needs a setting, both in time and in place, and that setting will have a big influence on what sort of people will meet there and what activities they'll be engaged in. When choosing a location, it's generally easiest for a writer to start close to home with places and topics which are already familiar to them, and which they already know in some detail. This gives them an opportunity to build off of research they've already done, rather than starting everything from scratch. I grew up in Washington State, and the late 19th century has always been a passion of mine. So it was a natural choice for me to set my historical fiction series in the Pacific Northwest of the late 1800s. Specifically, Chetzemoka is based on the town where my husband and I lived for 12 years at the corner of the Olympic Peninsula. As I mentioned at the start of this, the setting of a story will have a marked influence on the story itself, and western Washington is a landscape of saltwater and mountains. Both of these attributes shape the lives of the people there. What does that mean in terms of a story? Character-wise, access to the sea in the 19th century means ships and sailors. It also means sea captains and their families. I've been asked why the tales of Chetzemoka have such a nautical flair, and the answer is a very simple one. It's the nature of the place. Chetzemoka is a port city, and any story set there by necessity must include the people who make their living by saltwater. We should remember that in the 19th century there was a huge diversity of vessels on Puget Sound. There were the big sailing ships of song and story, and there were steamships as well, some as big as a city block, or even longer than that. In the Tales of Chetzemoka, Captain Kellam's trans-Pacific steamer, the Western Dawn, is one of these huge steamships. Besides the ships of sail and steam, there were a great number and variety of Indian canoes plying the waters of Puget Sound as well, for fishing, transportation, and to ferry passengers. The biggest of these were shaped from enormous old-growth cedar trees using hand tools, fire, and steam. Ships of all these types, the sailing ships, the steamships, and the Indian canoes, were constantly crisscrossing the waters of Puget Sound in the 1800s. And when the sailing and steamships moored together, the docks resembled forests of masts and smokestacks. Besides the ocean and its inland extension, Puget Sound, I mentioned that the Pacific Northwest is also characterized by mountains. In Book 6 of the Tales of Chetzemoka, 3 Women a Wheel, Mount Rainier gives our Chetzemoka ladies a picturesque destination when they visit Longmire's hot springs on the side of the mountain. In a bigger way, the mountains of Washington have an even more fundamental effect on the terrain of the stories. The sea breezes coming off the Pacific can feel mighty chilly at times, but the air is still relatively warm compared to the cold air coming down from the lofty mountain summits. Anyone who's ever grabbed a cold drink on a hot day and gotten a wet hand from the bargain knows about the condensation that results when cold meets warm. When the frigid air from the mountains collides with the warm air from the sea, the Pacific Northwest gets rain. It rains a lot there, to the point of Seattle's sogginess being proverbial. Now, what does this mean for world building and story building around the town of Chetzemoka? Besides some unavoidable rainy scenes now and then, rain equals rainforests. Rainforests mean trees, big trees, and a lot of them. And of course, another word for trees is timber. The timber industry was hugely important in developing Washington Territory in the 19th century. Clearing the trees freed up land for farming in cities, and even more immediately important, it created a huge number of jobs. The wealthiest character in the Tales of Chetzemoka is our friend the lovable but awkward Ethel Hauser, whose father is a timber baron. Young Sophie Fuller's mother is the cook at a logging camp, and many more minor characters come and go as part of the never-ending parade of loggers and sawmill workers. And in the midst of all this, we have the town itself, with all the specialized occupations that made towns bustling in the 19th century. From doctors and dressmakers like Doc and Kitty, to clerks and journalists like Ken and Felix. Add them all together, and you've built a world, and brought the past back to life in full color. An author who writes historical fiction is essentially crafting a portal through time for their readers. Someone who opens their book should feel like they've gone back to a vibrant and fascinating world. Unlike with other genres like sci-fi or fantasy, the worlds that historical fiction authors bring our readers to really did exist. The more we know about them and the more we feel ourselves touched by them, the more alive we can bring them for our readers. Thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up, and remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!